Today, Jess Schmittling and I are having some conversation on the transition that happens in baseball and softball between around 13U, 14U, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, kind of in that window. And it's been a goal of ours in the extreme to help families transition into the part of our program that's called Extreme Elite. And Extreme Elite has some differences. So maybe just let's start there, Jess. What are some typical differences from extreme to Extreme Elite?
Yeah, I think the biggest, like the way that I kind of explain it to families is as we're transitioning to elite, kids are starting to understand more of what their goals are when it comes to the sport. And they also, at times, are starting to realize that maybe not every other kid on the field wants the same thing that they do. And so they start to desire that like-minded teammate, the team alongside them. So I think the biggest transition is like trying to help kids get into an environment that makes their goals real and available to them, along with other
Right.
teammates that are doing the same thing.
And sometimes those goals they may have goals that are higher than
Hmm.
others that they were on the field with before, or it can also be in the other direction. Maybe their goals aren't as developed,
Hmm.
and so they are maybe transition to a situation that allows them to develop those goals. So I think that sometimes we think elite, that means okay, we're going to go into elite and I'm ready to go
Right.
play college ball, but that's not necessarily the case. We're starting to position and line up where your goals at that current time, and put you
Hmm.
with like-minded people at that current time, but that can change.
Right. Yeah. A tiered system that just starts to put you into your skill and goal level and how those align for that season, and then how do we keep moving you forward through that and give you opportunities to
Yep.
move within our system, our tiers.
Another thought that I had when thinking about the transition to the Extreme Elite is that we are introducing those young athletes to other perspectives.
Hmm.
Sometimes that might be a non-parent coach might be around them a little bit more, or new coaches, a different parent coach. It By having a little bit more exposure to other coaches, it starts to prepare them for whether it's a middle school sport or a high school sport. It starts to prepare them for, yeah, when you were younger, you might have been this position, or you might have been this, labeled this type of a player. But when you bring in those other perspectives, that actually can it can allow athletes to spread their wings a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah, I think at times that that jump can feel like we want to push parents out, but I don't think that could be further from the truth. Really, we want to continue to have a relationship with the families. We know that's the backbone, but also we want to keep instilling in the athlete that there's a future where they're going to be an adult and have to do a lot of different things there. So them getting that feeling of spreading their wings comes in lots of different forms. It can come from communication, it can come from positionally, like you were talking about, but it doesn't mean that we're trying to like boot the parents out the door. I think it's just trying to navigate that a little bit differently and more athlete led to help them spread their wings.
Let's talk about the athlete side. Why do you see that can be uncomfortable for the athlete? Why is that sometimes stretch the athlete, or make them uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think tough conversations are ahead whenever the athlete is leading the journey. If that's conversations about the positions they've played in the past, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like having them be the ones that then go talk to the coach about that, that is uncomfortable. I think also like, okay, what do you mean I have to read an itinerary that tells me what I'm supposed to wear that weekend, and I'm the one that's supposed to do my laundry and set that out as an athlete? And so um, those changes are tough because they're out of their normal, but as they are growing as a human, they're also then growing as an athlete through that.
Yeah, and just as a former college coach and a high school coach, I mean, the position um, labels, or the where I batted in the lineup, and those things that are kind of artificially put upon us when we're younger, they kind of go away, right?
Hmm.
Puberty affects that. And, maybe you were fast when you're younger and you're not as fast when you're older, or maybe you were really powerful early, but you've kind of plateaued, or whatever that may be. I think we need to kind of get rid of those labels as quickly as we can,
Hmm.
because specifically as a high school focus, you need to have that flexibility. You need to be able to play multiple positions, be coachable to that. The language of I've always played this or I've always done this. That's language that the sooner that we can get rid of that, the better.
Hmm. And I think like when you're younger, usually, I mean, typically coaches usually take one of two approaches. They're either going to just like move everyone around on the field just to gain experience and they're just trying things out, or they're taking more of a very like strategic, almost like game changer type of approach of like where the stats are falling. It helps
Hmm.
them to like create lineups. And so it's this false sense of what the game actually is from a strategic lens when you get into those high school settings, and like how do you actually build a lineup with all the puzzle pieces working together instead of just this philosophy of I'm going to move everybody around, or you're either top of the roster or you're not. And being able to put it more around development and like I said, how those puzzle pieces all fit together. So I think that transition can be again, it's just like what they've always known is all of a sudden different,
Yeah.
and trying to communicate why it's different can be challenging.
Some ways that we've had that kind of outside perspective around those 13, 14, 15U age groups. It could be a non-parent coach. Some of our
Mm-hmm.
teams have non-parent coaches that are, come back and transition a team that's maybe been parent led for, a certain number of years, and transition them into being non-parent led. We also have, program days where maybe we bring multiple teams together within a certain age group and start to test them, score them, align them. And I just find that those are some of the more stressful situations that we have as a program.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, you know, I keep using the word labels, just the assumptions or labels or, um, you know, the things that are put upon young athletes. If somebody from the outside has a different perspective, it's quick for a mom or a dad or an athlete to say, no, I play that position. He doesn't play that. Or, have you ever seen her play? She's not really that good, or she's really good and you're underscoring her. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we try to um, help them prepare for all of those labels and those predetermined things really don't matter, and the athlete's got to be able to stand on their own, relay their feelings. Maybe they do feel like they're being undervalued, or they feel like they're
Mm-hmm.
being overlooked. That happens. That definitely does
Yeah.
happen. As a coach, I've overlooked athletes' capabilities in certain spots, but the athlete has to learn how to deal with that and to communicate that. So yeah, I guess, do you maybe share your experiences on why those situations are stressful, or how can we help parents, or how can we help athletes with that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I was saying at the very beginning of like we're not pushing families or we're not pushing parents out the door with this. So like there's always, it feels like at times there can be a barrier of like they trusted in, maybe this is a neutral coach, and so they trusted in that parent coach before, and they brought them up through the system and now you're handing them off. And so like trust has to be rebuilt with that neutral coach, or education around who, whatever the athlete's journey's been up to that point has to be relearned. And then I think the other side of it is at times our neutral coaches, of course, have, they have experience. So it's like trying to get that buy in and that trust while that experience is being lifted up is the, from my experience, has been something that can be challenging. It's like I'm trying to do what's best for your kid, and sometimes that's met with like, oh well, I don't trust you yet. And so I think that's okay because we're going to work through that together, but it is a reality of what that looks like on both the parent family and the neutral coach side of that. So I think
Mhm.
some of the ways that we can help with that is just the communication has to be very thorough. It has
Yeah.
to be to the point of like your athlete's probably going to come home from that alignment day and say, oh, it was good. And like, that's probably about what they're going to get. So as a coach, giving more information about what is really happening behind the scenes will help with that buy-in, with that trust, that needs to be built for that new neutral coach.
Yeah. Yep. Um, so another area of this, or another reason for this transition that is important to us, is around communication.
Mm-hmm.
Helping the athlete prepare to communicate, communicate on their own, or to communicate with their adults directly.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that look like? So I have a middle school son, who has to communicate with his teachers, has to, his words matter. We talk about that. We talk about when he has a bad test score and his first words come out are usually blaming something, and those words matter, and how he communicates with the adults in those situations matter. His schedule, one of the, as a high school coach, one of the struggles I always have is, the athletes that, hey, what's your weekly, you ask them what their schedule looks like, and they, well, I just kind of get in the car and my mom and dad takes me wherever I'm going. And that's not real. And the adversity that we face going through school and going through jobs and so forth, we want to try to help athletes with that transition. The communication transition is a big piece. What do you see in kind of your ways that you're preparing those 13, 14s and 15s with that communication transition?
I think just giving platforms to be able to do that. So one thing that is really important is like making sure you recognize what those platforms are. So email is a big one specific to the team that I coach. Then also we use a GroupMe, and then also I have athletes' phone numbers. So just really creating clear guidelines of what the expectations are within those platforms, such as, GroupMe, we tell them like this is a group player platform. So like if it's not meant for the group, then it doesn't go into that platform. We then have a separate one for families, and same things apply there. We then have the email communication. So if it's a conflict, we talk about the fact that like we want those in an email. We want to be able to have a conversation with you about that, but it's an individual platform through email. It's a little more formal on that side of things. And then we also have kind of your more like informal type of messaging that would happen in text message. That's going to be able to be things that are more so like assignments for kids and things like that, and you're maybe working through. I was just having one the other day with an athlete around her pitch profile, so we were talking through that. It was a little more informal via text, but it was education for her. And so I think those kind of clear guidelines around communication, the platforms, what your expectations are in those things, the clearer you are with that, the more it helps the athlete understand that and be able to really follow through with those systems.
Yeah, and the systems don't stop. There's workout systems where athletes have to track their workouts. There's you know RSVP systems where they have to respond by saying, yes, I'm going to be there at this time or this day. Or so I think it's helping them to learn how to use their devices, use their computers and their phones for what what they're for, the communicating tools that they are. I had a parent say to me last night, we were just talking a little bit about this transition, and she made a comment. She's like, it's kind of like a gap year where you're learning a lot of new stuff, and it's different than where you came from, and it's different than where you're headed, and you're kind of using this year to gather all the information and the tools that you need. And I thought that was a really great representation of the trials that you're going to have, because there's so many unknowns. And you're going to ask a lot of questions, and you're going to be confused on the new things, but it's also a kind of a protected environment to do it in, to where you still have coaches and directors and other parents around here that can kind of help your child through that. So the communication preparation is, as soon as we can help those athletes kind of stand on their own to navigate those individually with the adults, they're going to have a huge advantage over most incoming freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and beyond.
Yeah, definitely. I think that having those different ways that they have to be able to do that gives them, you know, ways to transition that into other phases of their life. Like you were talking about with your son having to email his teachers. Well, if he's already learning to email his coaches, it's going to feel a little more comfortable when he goes in that setting. He's going to be a little more experienced in that. And then the same thing when he has to email his professors when he gets to college. Like
Yeah.
all of those things start to line up and trickle into their future lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that communication education continues all the way through high school. I mean, I'm around 17 and 18-year-olds a lot, and their offers from colleges are not coming via GroupMe or text. It is very formal in an email, so teaching them how to receive that, make sure they have an email address that's active and appropriately they can find information in a junk folder or whatever it is, navigating that, sending full sentence emails. The list goes on about these transitions of communication and also just, I mean, as a parent of an 8th grader, my wife and I do have to ask, is this something that we should be involved in? Is this something he should be doing on his own? How, we have to ask that question often. And I think not being afraid that you're feeling that way, but also not making the assumption that you should just do it for them.
Mm-hmm. Especially, and I know you said with the 17, 18-year-olds with college, like even going so far as to help them when it comes to using social media as a communication tool through recruiting too, of understanding that that is an important platform. And so beginning that as early as possible, because to have to go clean stuff up in your social media, that the earlier you can do that, the better.
Right.
And so helping even 13 and 14-year-olds really understand like the power of your words that matter on those types of platforms too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Helping 8th graders not create, their first email address that's lit dude 34 at, right. But like they're probably going to have to use that email down the road. So teaching them to, get started in that the right way. And putting safety measures in that as well. So let's talk competition. Another important factor of this transition is to stretch competition. And, I think as traditional 11, 12, 13U teams, you want to put yourselves in situations where you can win as much as you can or succeed as much as you can. And why do we do that? One, we want the kids to gain confidence. So that's important. We want to keep people happy. If right. people are happy, that kind of minimizes my conflict as a coach. So of course that's a driving factor. But I do find that this transition to the unknowns, playing in different tournaments, maybe not going in with the next, maybe it's a tournament that doesn't even have a trophy or it doesn't have a winning type of approach to it. It's a showcase or whatever it may be. That's another important factor of this transition, is helping push the envelope, making coaches and families and players uncomfortable to stretch them to their highest levels of capabilities. How do we help with that?
I think, again, it goes back to communication. If you truly are not trying to push families out, you're helping them understand what the why is behind the tournament schedule. I think the worst thing we can do for kids is when they get to 16U, 18U, and they haven't experienced anything up to that point that is going to stretch them, they feel like they're diving headfirst into the deep end. And that is a really scary place to be at that age. You haven't built any confidence in those more challenging settings. And so at the 13U, 14U levels, to be able to build a schedule that is more like I'm dipping my toe into this is going to feel a lot more like a stair step throughout their journey. And again, at that time, it may feel to them like they're diving in head first, but if there's rhyme or reason to the schedule, and we know as coaches that it is more of we're dipping our toe as we go through this, then we're going to be able to communicate that. We're going to be able to explain the vision of the long term. And so that's why our schedules, like, it has to have an understanding of a trajectory. It can't just be like, I'm going to randomly pick this tournament, and oh, my director said I'm supposed to like play in a showcase at some point, so I'm going to grab one of those. And So the trajectory of the schedules have to have a rhyme or reason. They have to have a competitive nature that is both challenging athletes, but also giving them some of that success to have the confidence built in there. And to me, really, that's the best way you can build a schedule, anyways. But really, if you're trying to communicate and educate for the long term, it's providing kind of those stair steps along the way.
I've seen you use a tool, kind of a probability tool or an expectation
Mm-hmm.
tool where, you're communicating with families like, here's our tournament schedule and here's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what we expect. We're going to win 25%, 50%, 75% of the games, like setting that expectation that not all tournaments are equal.
Right.
That I think that's been a huge help to families and coaches and athletes that are making this transition into elite.
And I think just like always going back to that is also really helpful. So as you're like in the grind of the tournament season, like, okay, we said we thought we were going to be 500 in this tournament. We actually were 750. Like, great for us, but like, what did we learn from that? Or we went into this thinking we were going to be 500 and we were below that. So like, what can we grow and learn from that experience too? And just being really honest about like, this was our expectation going in. Here's where we fell short, or here's where we rose above that. So now, maybe we need to pivot going into the next tournament what our expectations are, or maybe we can get this thing back on the tracks of what we originally planned out at the beginning of the season. And those kind of going back to the schedule all the time, or going back to those expectations all the time, is just another way to keep families in the loop as things progress throughout the year.
Let's finish up with kind of one more pillar. Another big reason that we encourage this transition into extreme elite at 14U or 13U, somewhere in that age group, is because of the increase in need for strength and conditioning. The just an incredibly moldable time in a young athlete's life, whether it's going through puberty, whether it's growing, whether it's still being undersized or maybe oversized for that age, just whatever it is, bringing in an increase in strength and conditioning is another reason that we push athletes into extreme elite early.
Yeah, I think because kids start to understand more about what their goals are, oftentimes those goals become less arbitrary. They start to be like metric based. And so if a kid tells me like I want to, pitch 60 by the end of my sophomore year, or I want to have an exit velocity of 70 by the time I'm, however old. And so like, yes, that's great. Start there with that metric. That's a skill-based metric, but then understanding the education behind why the strength floor then
Mm-hmm.
adds those things together and makes your goal a reality. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have that and you're just shooting for, you're just going to go rep after rep after rep after rep, and it's not going to get you anywhere. Because your body is changing and your body needs the support of a strength program that is very intentional. It's for the kid. It's for where their deficiencies are, and so then those goals become reality for them if they can really commit to the strength side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and learning what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Just signing up for a class, signing up for a gym membership, or taking a class in school or whatever it may be. Like, you may get some components of the strength and conditioning that you
Mm-hmm.
need, but you also, you may have deficiencies that you really need to focus on. And yeah, I love that. Last night, talking to a young athlete who does have goals of velocity increases or, speed increases. And those, the significant portion of those come from the strength floor, they come from the weight room. And so I think helping athletes maybe learn how to do that. It doesn't mean seventh graders are throwing up a bunch of barbells. It doesn't mean, that they're not learning things in a safe way. We invest in strength and conditioning coaches to be with them, to help them start by moving their body well, then by increasing their load once they're ready for that, and then by increasing their intensity and their speed when they're ready for that. So like, there is a scientific way based on where they're at in their journey of growth and development. You put that
Mm-hmm.
together and you can see huge strides. Again,
Right.
another conversation I had with a family, like, they have seen their athletes' playing time decrease. They've seen the athleticism of their athlete kind of decrease. And that athlete is in a sixth, seventh grade area. Their investment into training and their stretching into an elite type of program is exactly what they need, because it's going
Mhm.
to focus on athleticism and body and growth and development. And there's huge jumps. And whatever that athlete is labeled at now, it doesn't matter. Those huge jumps will change that in a very short amount of time.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think the difference is having the education and then the nutrition component
Mm-hmm.
added into those things. Kind of like you said, of like you can go to, a gym or whatever. You could think that you have enough through an athletic PE type of generalized program. And those things are good because they're foundation builders. But if you don't have the education behind it and the intentionality on the nutrition side of it, I think people end up feeling a little discouraged because they're like, "Oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Strength is important, so my kid's getting athletic PE." Well, again, I think in order to really dive into what an athlete needs, it's got to be more education based than just a generalized program.
Well, let's kind of wrap this up. So maybe some final words. What piece of advice would you provide families, athletes, coaches that are making this transition from, right around middle school or early high school, making this transition to a new playing environment? What would you leave them with?
I think the biggest statement I can make is parents, we still want your involvement. We still want a relationship with you. We still want you to be involved with your athlete's journey. But we also want to help prepare them for what's to come in their life. And the best way to do that is to allow them to really fly and to be able to trust in the coaches and trust in the process of being able to let them communicate on their own and handle their journey as a young adult.
Yep. And I hope that we can continue to open up the doors for communication just like this, and there's purpose and reason behind this transition, this gap year, as that mom said. There's purpose and reason for it, and there's a lot of methodology built into it that we have seen great fruit from. But I'm hopeful that we can, continue to open up dialogue, just like this, and to, maybe share reasons why, and share how we think we can continue to get better at it. And ultimately, the purpose behind it is being athlete focused and helping our athletes get to a spot to where they can navigate this transition in a more comfortable setting, a more comfortable feeling for themselves. So, appreciate the time talking about this transition, Jess.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this hardball talk on the transition from youth to an elite type of program that usually, or in our program, happens between 13s, 14s, and 15s, somewhere in that area. Hope this was helpful, and we look forward to the next time together.